You said heads, right?
Yeah.
It was tails, so Potomac KM, which would you all like to decide?
Um,
Which one?
I'm
we
sorry?
we won the coin flip, so would you like to be pro or con?
Do you want to do pro again or con?
Yeah, we can do pro again.
Okay.
Right. Let me write that down on my ballot.
And Judge,
And then Potomac CG, would you all like to be first or second speaker?
can we be first?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Oops. Mm, Oh, oops. All right. That tab room. All right. Um, Let me pull up the timer and then we can get started on the first word for I believe it's different this time. Hold on, guys. For the negative constructive speech. I'll start the timer on the first word.
All right. Hello, Judge. My name is Arun Gupta, and I'm going to be your first negative speaker. Time begins with my first word. And we stand in negation to the resolution resolved that the U.S. federal government should eliminate its intercontinental ballistic missiles, or ICBMs. Our first contention is that they provide protection to ourselves and our allies. The U.S. Senate 2016 depicts the tactical advantages of ICBMs, such as how they're a persistent deterrent force, impossible to target due to how widespread they are, and how they cannot be destroyed from a limited nuclear attack. With these advantages, we, alongside our allies, would be safe from our enemy's fear of nuclear retaliation, which could result in nuclear war, which displays the pure deterrence induced from our ICBMs. Additionally, Atlantic Council 2021 implies how fewer silos would be easier to disarm, meaning that 400 is the ideal amount for the number of ICBM sites. In addition to protection, keeping ICBMs assures our allies that we're still committed to our alliances, and the abundance of ICBM sites throughout the U.S. hinder our enemies from executing an attack against us and our allies by preventing them from being able to disarm all of them at once. Additionally, ICBMs are a manifestation of the power of the U.S., alongside a tool through which we could keep the nuclear power of our allies in check. Expanding on how ICBMs affect our relationships with our allies, ICBMs aid in forming a nuclear umbrella with them. SOFREP states that a deterrence challenge the U.S. has to face is a growing nuclear arsenal of China and Russia, and how they're starting to use coercive measures to win conventional disputes, which raises the risk for the two nations attacking us and our allies. If the U.S. chooses to eliminate their ICBMs, our allies and we will be put at risk due to Russia's and China's growing nuclear firepower that could be used on us. Nuclear war could be avoided, which could vastly limit the amount of civilian casualties that could occur with complete destruction of the environment, which could cause billions upon billions of dollars caused by radiation and impacted nuclear missiles. Additionally, ICBMs allow us to keep the nuclear power of our allies in check, which would be beneficial for us in the case that our allies decide to unite with our enemies, while removing ICBMs could cause proliferation, as other non-nuclear countries have a reason to make their own nukes. Also, due to the fact that our allies feel protected through our alliance, relations would be greatly removed, which would benefit infrastructural qualities of the U.S., including military strength, imports, exports, etc. Our second contention is that ICBMs are inexpensive compared to other legs of the nuclear triad. According to Atlantic Council 2021, ICBMs are the least expensive leg of the triad, which because much of the cost is through designing and testing the first new missile rather than serial production costs. Since the most expensive aspect of an ICBM is the research and development behind the new missile created, the U.S. is given the opportunity to direct the majority of their focus towards developing ICBMs, and finding ways to bypass the current issues without worrying about the cost of manufacturing ICBMs en masse. Additionally, the Arms Control Association 2018 provides a visual depicting the cost of certain pathways the U.S. government could take in order to replace or limit the amount of ICBMs present. The visual shows that the cost for delaying GBSDs, or ground-based strategic deterrences, and refurbishing the existing Minuteman III ICBM is $17.5 billion, while the cost for fielding a nuclear dyad without ICBMs is between $120 to $149 billion. The cost for certain actions that the government could take to just depict how much cheaper ICBMs are, which is why they should not be eliminated. And it actually costs much more to eliminate ICBMs rather than developing and modifying them. According to Atlantic Council 2021, the main problem with eliminating ICBMs is that there's multiple steps: transporting the missiles, removing the missiles, transporting, storing the warheads, demolishing structures, and environmental remediation. Due to the multiple steps, the total cost is greater than their development. Finally, the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory 2017 states that adding enhancements is theorized in being more expensive than maintaining the ICBM force indefinitely, because the ICBM force is around $100 billion loss, means that expensive itself, but the U.S. military budget is $1 trillion. The $100 billion for the ICBM pales in comparison. So the U.S. would have an inexpensive source of defense that we could spread out to prevent attacks, preventing civilian casualties, environmental damage, and since they're more costly efficient, it's extremely beneficial to for the government to be able to direct relatively small funds towards protection.
Thank you. That's time. That brings us to the affirmative constructive speech.
I'm Beta, and I'll be representing the pro side. We affirm the resolution that the United States federal government should eliminate ICBMs. Contention 1. Affirming will drastically decrease the death toll of intercontinental conflicts. There are currently 59 active state-based conflicts with 152,000 conflict-related deaths recorded in 2024 alone, with this number increasing to 400,000 in the span of a year, many caused by ICBMs, according to the International Crisis Group. We must understand the sheer gravity of these weapons and how much damage they could and have caused. The nuclear weapons dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki were only 15 to 20 kilotons respectively. Survivors of this harrowing event have known violence like no other. They depicted human beings as skeletons with their skin flaying off their bodies, and when people jumped into the water to escape the detonation, they were boiled alive. Allow me to make it clear that in the modern-day nuclear arsenal, these weapons dropped are considered to be low yield. I can explain that today's nuclear weapons are equivalent to 100 kilotons of dynamite, with some being much higher. If this is low yield, do we even want to see what the current detonation of 100 kilotons could cause? The answer is and will always be a firm no. The detonation would not only last for the time of war, but the years after, spreading a silent agony for generations. The impact of ICBMs is far too appalling to be ignored or passed over as collateral, because human lives are not collateral, and human lives should not be treated as sacrifices. Our second contention is that eliminating ICBMs would help support non-proliferation tactics. US ICBMs are the driving of dangerous global nuclear buildup. Keeping ICBMs fuels global arms competition and undermines disarmament efforts. Nuclear arms control has stalled while arsenals grow. Yahoo News 24 says all 9 nuclear-armed countries are now modernizing their warheads and delivery system. Meanwhile, all efforts to limit or reduce nuclear weapons have ground to a halt. US ICBM policy sends the wrong message. When the country with the most capable conventional forces the world has ever seen insists that it needs nuclear weapons to feel secure, it signals to every other nation that they need them too. It's effectively conceding the right to nuclear weapons to any country that fears attack. As the US invests in ground-based strategic deterrent, other powers like China and Russia react by expanding their own arsenals. This arms buildup is not just about defense, it's about precipitation and fear. When one country escalates, others feel forced to do the same thing to avoid falling behind. This creates a feedback loop of distrust and military buildup. The existence of ICBMs as part of the US policy gives countries a reason to justify their own modernization programs, even if they've previously shown restraint. Eliminating ICBMs would support non-proliferation and reopen arms reduction talks. The global arms race fuels mistrust and raises the risk of war. By removing ICBMs, the US could break the cycle of proliferation and show leadership and build trust with allies and non-nuclear nations. Without action, the arms race will only grow, increasing the danger of miscalculation, nuclear conflict, and deaths. Our third contention: ICBMs are too expensive to maintain. Maintaining and modernizing ICBMs imposes excessive financial burden with limited strategic return. The ICBM replacement program is exploding in cost. The immense cost of the Sentinel program is expected to reach over 315 billion with a 37% increase in just the 2 years. This money could be better spent on other things, such as our healthcare and educational system. AP News 24 states that the increased cost will also eventually be offset by cuts to other programs, such as cyber defense, readiness, and support for allies. Ukraine aid is already on the line. With the budget pressure rising, Ukraine is at risk. Congressional Republicans have made it clear that if something needs to be cut, foreign aid will be the first thing to suffer. The GBSD program is expected to cost over 260 billion, not including future upkeep. Critics like former Defense Secretary William Perry and arms control experts argue that SLBMs and bombers already provide strong deterrents, making ICBMs costly and redundant. Keeping them adds billions with little security benefits. Eliminating ICBMs would save hundreds of billions that can go towards smarter security. Thank you.
That's time. That brings us to the first crossfire of the round. Does either team need prep time?
I don't.
You said no, correct?
I said no.
Then I'll start it on the first question.
All right, do you have any questions?
Yeah. Do you believe that every country having their own ICBMs is a good thing?
I do not believe that every country having their ICBMs is a good thing, but if a certain country were to if because if some sort of country would be able to aid in
Okay.
proliferation. Yeah.
But proliferation is the reason that these countries have ICBMs in the first place. They saw the US that we stated in our contention, the US that has the most conventional forces building up their nuclear arsenal. So in turn, they needed to do the same thing. That is inherently what encouraged our enemies and adversaries to do the same thing.
One could also argue that that because of our ICBMs it prevents proliferation in our allied countries because it allows us to um it allows us to because it allows us to check on the amount of checks
Okay.
and we have
Can I
ICBMs.
ask another question, please?
Sure.
Do you believe that we are rational in times of war?
I do believe with the right leadership we are rational in times.
But what about without the right leadership? With the leadership we have right now, do you believe that we would be stable in a time of war?
Oh, what do you mean? Like, can you be more specific, please?
Can I be more? Okay. So with the leadership positions that we have right now, congressional officers and the president, do you believe that we will be rational in a time of war?
I mean, due to the amount of levels of like the levels that a decision has to go through before it's actually finally made in our current government state, I believe that we could make rational decisions during war.
Okay, but I'm talking about like overall, do you believe we will enter a war rational? Like, do you believe the reason cause for war would be rational?
I mean, generally, if you look historically, we've only joined in wars or started wars because of an attack on either us or one of our allies. So I believe
Okay,
that.
and decisions of the ones that we are not on the right side,
Huh?
do you understand like how that could pose threatening opinion?
Wait, can you repeat that, please?
When like right now we wouldn't be on the correct like if we were to get into a nuclear war, are you positive that we would be on the correct side?
Honestly, no one knows if anyone's going to
Currently
be on the
with
right
these
side.
leaders. No, okay. Do you have any other questions for me?
Yeah. Do you believe that ICBMs are the sole reason for escalation between countries?
No, I believe that it's a combination of corrupt officials, and the threat of nuclear weapons that escalate conflicts. But I feel like eliminating ICBMs would make sure that we have a stable ground waste level to say that we are responsible enough to do so. We don't fear anyone. That's basically what. Okay.
Um, thank you. That's time. That brings us to the neg rebuttal.
Could I use a minute of prep time?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'll start the timer for your rebuttal on your first word.
Okay. Timer starts on my first word. Judge, our opponents give you 3 reasons why we should eliminate ICBMs. First, let's talk about their contention 1 on ICBMs decreases death. Judge, this is completely inaccurate and invalid, and here's why. First of all, ICBMs do not increase deaths through accidents because accidents are extremely rare. Incidents like the 1983 Soviet false alarm were detected and managed without any launches. They didn't result in any deaths, nullifying my opponent's argument. U.S. command and control also has multiple safeguards, fail-safes, and human oversight to prevent accidental launch, and because of this, no ICBM-related accident has ever caused death or injury. My opponent fails to give any evidence about these harms. Second, removing ICBMs won't prevent deaths. Rather, it risks greater casualties by weakening deterrence. The claim that ICBMs kills lives ignores that their presence deters nuclear war and large-scale conventional conflict. Eliminating ICBMs increases the risk of first strike and war, which would cause millions of deaths, far outweighing any hypothetical harm from ICBMs themselves. Third, their argument is non-unique. Other nuclear forces and defense programs have risks too. SLBMs and bombers also pose risks. Cyber vulnerabilities, accident, and escalation pressures. So blaming ICBMs alone for hypothetical harm ignores that the entire nuclear program involves risks balanced by deterrence benefits. Fourth, their evidence is outdated, misleading, and is irrelevant. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were hit by gravity bombs dropped from planes in 1945, not by ICBMs. This proves that bombers, which their plan relies on, is ineffective. ICBMs are missiles, which did not exist in 1945. Comparing them is misleading because it's like comparing a sword to a drone. Second, they stated that the U.S. is not providing aid to Ukraine. However, according to the CSIS, in July of 2025, the U.S. resumed to send aid to Ukraine, proving their evidence is outdated and irrelevant. Second, let's look at their second contention on how ICBMs would help support non-proliferation efforts. However, this claim is completely invalid, and let me tell you why. First of all, removing ICBMs actually risks causing proliferation. ICBMs are a critical part of the U.S. nuclear umbrella. It promises our allies that they don't need their own nuclear weapons because they can rely on ours. If we remove ICBMs, we send a signal that the US is backing away from nuclear defense. That creates fear and uncertainty among our allies, leading them to consider developing their own nuclear weapons for self-defense. So ironically, their plan actually increased the risk of nuclear proliferation, which they're trying to avoid. And second, as I have said, ICBMs do not encourage proliferation. The US has had ICBMs for over 60 years, and that hasn't triggered a wave of nuclear proliferation. Third, let's look at their final contention on ICBMs being too expensive to maintain. They argue that they cost too much and that money could be better spent and invested into other sectors such as healthcare and education. However, this argument is flawed, and let me tell you why. Even if you do remove ICBMs, that money is not going to be reinvested into healthcare, schools, or education. Rather, that money my opponent thinks will be saved is just going to be reinvested back into the military's budget. Judge, if my opponent is arguing that the money is going to be used for better causes, it really is not, because that money is again going to defense spending. Second, ICBMs are in fact cheaper to maintain than SLBMs and bombers. Gunslinger finds a recent Department of Defense assessment concluded that annual operations and support funding required for its ICBM force was about $1.4 billion per year compared to $3.8 billion for the Ohio-class SSBN, proving that ICBMs cost half as less as SLBMs. Third, to claim that ICBMs are too expensive is ignorant and misleading. Judge, let's look at the actual fact and put this into context. According to the Arms Control Association, the cost of the new ICBM program can cost up to $350 billion. However, according to Lawler and McGiffin, they explained the federal official in charge of the Corona Relief Fund estimates that $400 billion, I repeat, $400 billion of the fund's $900 billion were lost to fraudulent payments to foreign entities. So their argument that ICBMs are too expensive is not true because ICBMs are actually affordable. My opponent's argument is unreasonable and invalid because it ignores the reality that we already waste far more money on fraud and efficiency every year. If we can afford to spend that money on fraud, then we can. Thank you, Judge.
That's time. That brings us
Can
to
I,
the. I'm
um,
sorry.
I'm sorry. Can I take a minute of prep?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. My time will begin on my first word. Their contentions claim ICBMs protect the US and allies by deterring war and maintaining security, but this ignores that ICBMs actually increase the risk of accidental nuclear war because they are on high alert and require rapid launch decisions. The supposed stability from spreading missiles across silos makes the US homeland a direct target, putting millions of civilians at risk. Submarines and bombers already provide a survivable second strike without the same dangers. So, ICBMs do not improve security. They make us more vulnerable. They also argue removing ICBMs would increase proliferation and make us appear weak. This is backwards. Our global arms race contention shows that maintaining ICBMs encourages other countries, like China and Russia, to expand their arsenals, fueling the very proliferation they claim to prevent. Removing ICBMs would be a powerful signal of restraint, encouraging disarmament efforts and reducing global tensions. On cost, they say ICBMs are the cheapest part of the trial and that eliminating them would cost more. But the reality is the opposite. The modernization program alone will cost over $260 billion, and that money could be redirected to better defense. Their claim that funds will just stay in the military ignores that cutting ICBMs open space for smarter spending on cyber defense, missile tracking, and diplomacy. Our whole third contention refutes their cost contention. Our contention says that the Nation 24 states the immense cost of the Sentinel program, which is now estimated to be at least $315 billion over the lifetime of the system, includes an astonishing 37% increase in projected acquisition over just the past 2 years. The increased cost will also eventually be offset by cuts to other programs. Ukraine aid is already on the line. With budget pressure rising, Ukraine aid is at risk. Congressional Republicans have made it clear that if something needs to be cut, foreign aid will be the first target. As well as the IBP states, global spending on nuclear armament trades off with social services. Over the next 10 years, governments will spend $1 trillion on nuclear weapons, cutting health education, environmental protection, and welfare. Do not forget that the GBSD program is expected to cost over $260 billion, not including future upkeep. Critics like former Defense Security William Perry and arms control experts argue that SLBMs and bombers already provide stronger deterrence, making ICBMs costly and redundant. Keeping them adds billions with little security benefit. Uh, Now addressing their rebuttal. They say false alarms and accidents are rare, but even one mistake could trigger nuclear war. History shows near misses happen, and with ICBMs on hair trigger alert, the risk is real and unacceptable. Their claim that ICBMs uniquely deter war ignores that deterrence also depends on survivability. Sometimes something submarines provide better. Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
What time?
How much prep time do I get? Do we have?
You used 1 minute, so you'll have 2 minutes left. Both teams have 2 minutes left.
All right, can I use 1 minute of prep time?
Wait, we're on.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Wait, aren't we on cross right now?
Yes, we'll be starting Crossfire.
Um, do you want me to ask the first question or?
Yes, you can ask the first question.
Okay, so first of all, you guys said that the US isn't providing aid to Ukraine, but I have provided evidence that says that the CSIS shows that on July 5th, 2025, that the United States started providing aid to Ukraine. So your evidence is outdated.
Okay.
Okay, I'm saying like, oh sorry, let me rephrase my question, sorry. I'm asking like, do you guys still believe that or like are you proving that your evidence is outdated? Like,
I'm okay. That was just like something saying that we are using that ICBMs are super expensive, that we were thinking of like cutting off Ukraine aid. It still shows the fact that ICBMs are very expensive to maintain. Okay, may I ask a question? Mhm.
yeah, you can, yeah.
Oh, okay. So if we, so are you suggesting we should continue to fund a system we know we can never safely use?
I mean, we are currently safely using the ICBM system. We have, I like, it is working right now. We have seen that it is working because since we've never had to use them. That shows that its deterrence is working. And the other countries, such as Russia and China, they are deterred by our ICBMs. So the argument that they're unsafe really does not matter because our benefits outweigh that.
Okay.
Do you want me to ask the next question?
Yes, of course.
Um, So you guys talk about SLBMs, right? So isn't deterrence about sending like a clear signal? How does something that's invisible send a clear signal or threat?
Um, Wait, what did you say?
Oh, yeah, okay. So basically, you guys talked about SLBMs and how we need to rely more on them. So isn't deterrence about sending like a clear, visible signal? How does like SLBMs, which is invisible, send a clear threat to Russia or China or like North Korea?
Oh, okay. So SLBMs deter differently from ICBMs because they rely on stealth and survivability rather than visibility. ICBMs are fixed and hardened silos on land. They are very visible targets, so their presence sends a clear physical signal of deterrence. However, SLBMs, on the other hand, are hidden in submarines underwater, and their main deterrence comes from being nearly impossible to detect and destroy before launch, which is a much more effective way.
You said that you guys were talking about how ICBMs are vulnerable because their locations are also known. But in your plan, when you remove ICBMs, you're relying on SLBMs and bombers. So, don't you agree that bombers' locations are also known to the entire public, so they have the chance of being attacked by our enemies too? So just by like pinpointing ICBMs, I feel like that's not fair because bombers' locations are also known.
Yeah, but we're not just using bombers, we're also using SLBMs.
But like suppose hypothetically that in an attack the bombers do get attacked, then you only have one leg of the triad left, which is SLBMs. That's incredibly dangerous for our civilians and especially the civilians in other countries, especially like Canada that doesn't even have nuclear weapons.
Okay. So may I ask a question? Okay, so if we are truly committed to non-proliferation, would removing ICBMs not be a stronger signal of leadership?
Could you rephrase your question?
Oh, sorry.
Time. That brings us to the summary.
All right. Time begins after my first word, and we stand in negation to the resolution resolved that being the U.S. federal government should eliminate its ICBMs because ICBMs function as a source of protection for the United States as well as our allies by deterring conflict and assuring our allies that we'll provide protection towards them. Additionally, ICBMs are the least expensive leg within the nuclear triad, meaning that we're able to sustain a large amount of them without sacrificing much of the government's budget. Arguments my opponent has made are that our ICBMs are the root cause of deaths in the thousands. But this fails to take into account that ICBMs weren't meant to be used in a war, as its entire purpose is to deter war. However, if adding on to this, or what they ICBMs are not the root cause of deaths or despair. That the same could be applied to SLBMs or bombers or the GBSDs. Uh, Additionally, escalation is also non-unique since ICBMs are not the root cause of escalation between countries. This also applies to SLBMs, bombers, and GBSDs, to which the affirmation is defending. Adding on to this, the affirmation brought up the Hiroshima and Nagasaki disasters, which did not have to do with ICBMs at all, rather bombers, which is another nuclear device that they're defending, which shows a blatant contradiction present within their argument. Also, the contention about ICBMs being a waste of funds, which is untrue because their deterrence and inexpensive nature completely justifies their usage. They claim that the impact of eliminating ICBMs is saving lives as well as a way to decrease escalation. However, the glaring flaws present within their case demonstrate otherwise. Their surface level analysis of the situation blinds them towards the true purpose of ICBMs, which is essentially to deter conflict and improve relations with our allies by maintaining our strong and powerful image. Thank you.
All right, and then that brings us to the next summary.
Okay, can I get 1 minute prep time?
Yes.
The time will begin when I start my first word. Right. Okay. We affirm the resolution that the United States federal government should eliminate ICBMs. 1. ICBMs are far too expensive to maintain. Maintaining and modernizing ICBMs imposes excessive financial burdens with limited strategic return. The ICBM replacement program is exploding in cost. The Nation 24 states that the immense cost of the Sentinel program, which is estimated to be at least $315 billion over the lifetime of this system, includes an astonishing 37% cost increase in projected acquisition over just the past 2 years. The Nunn-McCurdy Act, an act stated by the American Federation of Scientists, has also predicted an 81% increase. This money could be better spent on other things, such as our healthcare and our education system, even the other parts of the nuclear dyad. The increased cost will also eventually offset cuts to other programs. These include cyber defense, readiness, and support for allies. Ukraine aid is already on the line. With budget pressure rising, Ukraine aid is at risk. We never stated that Ukraine aid was being cut. Ukraine aid is at risk of being cut. Congressional Republicans have made it clear that if something needs to be cut, foreign aid will be the first target. The next stated that our ICBMs guarantee ally protection. But this is wholly untrue, as ally protection actually stems from the funding that the US has to offer. And the funding, as shown, would be eliminated when we spend on our ICBMs. 2. ICBMs encourage the global arms race. The global arms race is jutted from the fact that the US, a country with the most capable conventional forces the world has ever seen, that it needs nuclear weapons to feel secure. It signals to every other nation that they need them too. When one country escalates, others feel forced to do the same to avoid falling behind. This is an ever-growing cycle of nuclear proliferation. By removing ICBMs, the US could break this cycle, show leadership, and build trust with our allies and non-nuclear nations. Without actions, the arms race will continue to go, increasing the dangers of nuclear conflicts and mass massacres. We outweigh on scope because the impact of ICBMs extends far beyond battlefield outcomes. It affects global lives and global systems. 3. Affirming will drastically decrease the death toll of intercontinental conflicts. Judge, affirming prevents the use of ICBMs, each of which could kill an estimate of over 543,000 people in a single detonation, as said in our first contention. This is just one missile. In the modern-day arsenal, these weapons are 100 times more powerful than those dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which the con claims are outdated. However, ICBMs have more dynamite in them than both those bombs, respectively, in turn causing more damage. No other impact in the round compares to the sheer scale of destruction caused by nuclear war, because human lives are not collateral and human lives should not be treated as sacrifices. In the end, our claim outweighs the neg because we base it on the value of human lives and not hypothetical assurances as the neg stated. Thank you.
All right. And then that brings us to Grand Cross. I'll start the timer on the first word.
You guys have a question?
Yeah, how did you compare? You compared bombs and ICBMs as using a sword and a drone, but we explained, okay, what do you mean by that?
Oh, okay. So you guys were talking about the bombs dropped from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? And you were saying how that caused so many mass casualties for civilians. However, that is completely unrelated because those are bombs. That's
Yeah, that was our point. Those are bombs, and those bombs have 15 to 20 kilotons, whereas ICBMs have more than that and would cause more damage. That was the reason we used bombs as an example. So I feel like in this situation, it should be flipped because ICBMs cause more damage than those bombs that were literally dropped that caused so much radiation, so much destruction, so much deaths. Bombs and ICBMs would be far, far, far more destructive.
Well,
That's what we were stating.
but the entire reason of using ICBMs is for large-scale wars. Do you agree with that?
Sorry?
The entire purpose of using ICBMs is for large-scale nuclear assaults, right?
Yes, that's true. But I feel like using ICBMs for wars in general is not a good source of. It's showing our enemies, our adversaries, that basically using the weapons that we have for to murder people that we don't to murder innocent people. That's
So,
basically what I
do you
mean.
believe that the
And
same?
also nuclear deterrence. I had a question about that. Do you believe that nuclear weapons make conflicts worse or make it better?
They make conflicts better because actually they prevent conflicts from arising. The threat of
Okay, okay, sorry, you can continue.
I'm saying that the threat of our ICBMs and our nuclear weapons are the reason we are safe right now and the reason why our ICBMs are safe right now. And also
Okay, but the 2020 invasion of Ukraine highlights how these countries have used nuclear weapons in a backfired way. So the sole reason that we haven't been attacked, I would base it on is the fact that well, we have the military capabilities. Yes, we have bombers, ICBMs, and we have SSLBMs, but eliminating ICBMs would prove that we are strong enough. We have the confidence in ourselves that we will destroy any of our adversaries with the remaining things that we have.
But
So,
one could argue that since Ukraine let go of their inherited ICBMs from the Soviet Union in 2014, and that immediately led to Russia's invasion on Crimea.
okay, but Ukraine is not as strong as the US is, right?
But
It's not.
it provides a base level comparison between what could happen.
No, it doesn't, because the difference in okay.
Judge, may I please?
That is
Oh, yeah. May I
that
please
is.
minute of prep time for the final focus?
I'm sorry. What did you say?
May I please use 1 minute of prep time for the final focus?
Yes. I'll start the timer on the first word for the final
First,
focus.
I'm gonna provide an off-the-clock roadmap. So first, I'm gonna give the reasons to vote for neg. Then I'm gonna collapse and end with some impact weighing. Timer begins on my first word. Judge, the negative team wins this debate and for a few reasons, and here's why. First of all, dropped arguments, and the AF did not respond well to our arguments. Judge, the AF underdeveloped their responses to our biggest impacts: deterrence, allied credibility, and cost efficiency. Even if they claim SLBMs are stealthier, stealth doesn't deter adversaries like visible, widespread ICBMs do. Also, Judge, the affirmative completely dropped one of the most important arguments in this round. We clearly explained that as China and Russia expand their arsenals, the US becomes more vulnerable without ICBMs. ICBMs are the only leg of the triad capable of responding quickly enough and visibly enough to both threats at once. They gave you no response for that. That's a huge concession, which means they agreed that removing ICBMs makes it less secure and weakens our deterrent against Russia and China. Also, their arguments are completely unrelated. They mentioned in Grand Cross how Russia invaded Ukraine recently. However, when Russia invaded, they didn't even use ICBMs, proving our point that ICBMs are not used to threaten lives. Second, scope. We win on scope because we have a wider scope, meaning our arguments affect more people. The AF is saying that it is acceptable to leave the innocent civilian lives in our allied countries vulnerable and without protection. And I repeat, most of these countries do not have nuclear weapons, so they are extremely dependent on the US. Judge, our opponent's argument is selfish. They would rather preserve the United States than preserve the millions of lives, I repeat, millions of lives combined in our allied countries. Third, evidence quality. We have consistently proved current reliable sources that back up our points. Judge, their evidence is inaccurate, outdated. If their evidence is outdated, how can we trust that what they are saying? For example, during the case, they stated that the U.S. is cutting aid to Ukraine. However, according to CSIS, in July of 2025, the U.S. resumed to send aid to Ukraine, proving their evidence is outdated and irrelevant. So, Judge, our evidence is much newer and relevant compared to their outdated events. Finally, impact weighing. Judge, you should vote based on impact magnitude, which side affects more people and with more intensity. Judge, our impacts don't just affect us, but they affect the lives in multiple countries combined. The U.S. has over 50 allies, and removing ICBMs will leave them vulnerable. Judge, let me ask you a question. What's more important?
You can finish your sentence.
Judge, good question. What's more important to you, avoiding World War III or saving a few $1 billion here and there that are negligible in the long run? Thank you.
Thank you. And then that brings us to our last final focus.
Um, okay, my time will begin on my first word. My opponents argue that false alarms and accidents with ICBMs are rare, but even one mistake could trigger nuclear war. History shows near misses have happened, and with ICBMs on hair trigger alert, the risk of accidental war is real and unacceptable. They also claim ICBMs uniquely deter war, but deterrence depends on survivability, which submarines provide better than fixed silos. Hiroshima and Nagasaki show nuclear weapons power, and modern ICBMs are far more destructive. They also say removing ICBMs would signal weakness and risk proliferation. However, keeping ICBMs fuels the global arms race by pushing rivals to build more and more weapons, worsening the problem. On costs, even if funds stay in the military, it makes more sense to shift money from expensive, vulnerable ICBMs to modern, flexible defenses. Their cost argument ignores upkeep, silo maintenance, and security expenses, which add significantly. We outweigh on scope because our impact affects not only our nation, but the entire world. The potential damage from a nuclear war triggered by ICBMs is catastrophic, involving massive death tolls and global instability. The opponents underestimate how ICBMs contribute to the global arms race, which increases the risk for everyone. In contrast, alternatives like submarines reduce this risk by providing deterrence without escalating towards widespread devastation. Our position covers a much larger scope by protecting global securities and millions of lives. We also outweigh on probability because history confirms that false alarms and near misses do happen. The risk that one error could cause nuclear war is not hypothetical, but proven. Opponents claim these risks are rare, but ignore with hair trigger alert, even a low probability is unacceptable. The neg failed to bring human lives into their rebuttal. Every life is worth living, and human lives are not a sacrifice that we should make. We also outweigh on time frame because the risk of accidental war is immediate and ongoing. Opponents argue benefits of ICBMs for long-term deterrence, but the harms of their maintenance and presence start now and grow over time as the arms race escalates. Thus, we urge a pro ballot. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all. I'm finishing up my ballot now, so just give me a few minutes. Um, Before I do finish it entirely though, this was a wonderful debate. Thank you all so much. Um, and I'll give the rest of my feedback once I finish and submit my ballot.
You guys did really good, by the way. I just want to say that.
You
The
guys?
same with you guys.
Thank you.
I was literally shaking the whole time.
That is very.
Yeah, I was so hard answering your crossfire questions. I was like, oh.
I was like trying to think of evidence in my head, and I was like, where did every single fact I know go? It just like disappeared. And I was like, also, where are you guys from?
Oh, I'm from McLean, Virginia. So,
I'm from England.
I was like, wait, I know you have an accent. And
Yeah, yeah.
like when I was younger, I always wanted to be like British. I was like, I want to have an accent.
Yeah, no, I'm from England, but I'm living in Texas right now, so that's the reason I can like.
That's so cool, actually.
Yeah.
That's a flex, you know, like I'm from another country. I live in New Jersey.
oh, I was born there.
Really, we're in New Jersey.
Yeah, I think Morristown. I forgot.
Wait, Morristown. That's like
Yeah, Morristown.
that's nice.
Also, congrats on the speaker award. I think you really deserve that one.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Small glitch in tab room, but we did get it in order. Y'all can't see me really. Um, First and foremost, congratulations. As I said before, this was a wonderful debate to watch. You all did amazing. You all spoke very clearly. It showed that you all knew what you were talking about. You were engaged, and I love that. I could tell that you guys took notes on what your opponent said, which is great. Your rebuttals weren't like stiff, if that makes sense. They adapted to what your opponent said, which is good. The crossfire questions were great. It's not a lot to say. You guys seem like very experienced. So I'll keep it pretty brief. I did give the win to Potomac GC on the oh my goodness, on the neg. I'm sorry. I'm looking at tab room in my notes and they changed as you were speaking. So I did give the win to Potomac GC on the neg, so congratulations. Um Essentially it was your final focus. Um of course writing and typing, we all know it can be a lot. So hearing you guys like go back over everything in like a concise method, it helps me because it reminds me like, oh, I did hear that, but I didn't get the chance to write it because I was writing something else. So thank you for that. That's pretty much it. Did anyone have any questions? If not, and staff is okay, then I think that's it.
Yeah, amazing round, everyone. Congratulations. Really nice work. You are welcome to head out.
Thank you.
Bye. And
Thank
thank you for
you.
Bye.
Alexandria. Much appreciated.
You're welcome.
Thank, thank
Always a
you.
pleasure.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
You too.